were approved for sale. Deals to Algeria included combat and military utility helicopters worth $430 million. Egypt's list included components for armored personnel carriers and submachine guns. And for Saudi Arabia, sniper rifles and small arms ammunition were among last year's sales. Britain is currently the 5th largest seller of weapons in the world, and that potentially conflicts with its diplomatic standing.
The weapons they're selling are likely to be used. The people who want to buy the weapons generally want to use them. And this is the nature of the arms trade that the government has given such a heavy commitment to supporting.
And while the weapons trade provides such a profitable paycheck, there may be hesitation to clamp down on it. The UK has placed sales of arms to Bahrain under urgent review. But until it stops arming governments with the means to crush dissent, critics say its calls for democracy may sound a little hollow to those suffering the end result. Sonia Gallego, Al Jazeera, London.
France has kicked off its presidency of the G20 group of nations with a warning from President Sarkozy. He said national interests must be put to one side, or they could face the prospect of the organization failing. Sarkozy went on to remind the gathered ministers of the challenges facing them as they embark on a weekend of negotiations over so-called indicative guidelines. Now, these are aimed at signaling imbalances that could threaten individual economies and global stability. Well, our correspondent Jackie Rowland is monitoring events in Paris.
The real point of President Sarkozy's speech was that when you have a global financial system and all the different economies are so closely interlinked, as we saw in the effects, the widespread effects of the crisis in 2008, his argument is you need a global approach, a global coordinated approach to achieving growth, and also coordination when it comes to how to regulate the way that markets worked. And he gave a warning that if countries tried to go it alone, then it would have a disastrous effect on the whole system.
If we do nothing, world imbalances are going to become greater. Of course, it's easier to reach consensus at a time of recovery, but the temptation to give priority to national and domestic interests is very great. I want to say very clearly that this would spell the death of the G20.
And also a warning about imbalances and volatility in global markets. In particular, we've seen very, very volatile exchange rates, the dollar in particular going up and down, and also volatility in commodities prices. The price of a barrel of oil now back over $100 a barrel. And in particular, concern about the price of raw food materials, because this can cause food insecurity and the kind of rioting that we've seen in recent years in Haiti, Senegal and Mozambique, and really a condemnation of speculators, people who would speculate on the price of food. When you bear in mind that food is a basic, it's not just an investment tool, it's something that really people absolutely need. It's a basic requirement of life.
Let's go to Uganda now, where polls have closed after a day of voting in the country's presidential elections. It's expected Yoweri Museveni will be returned to office and extend his 25-year grip on power. Our correspondent Mohammed Ado reports now from Kampala.
The Ugandan military on patrol in the east of the country. They were called in to end the fighting between supporters of Uganda's defense minister, Beatrice Wabudea, and her parliamentary opponent, Nandala Mafabi. Journalists were caught up in the violence. This reporter was shot by security forces. Julius Odeke says he was shot when he refused to hand over his camera.
The windows were closed. I refused to open. At last I had a gunshot and I started feeling myself paralyzed. I saw blood.
And in the capital, Kampala, vote counting commenced immediately. Polling stations closed. Here, opposition supporters cheer every vote for President Museveni's opponents. Tempers flared earlier on in the day when most voting booths did not open on time. Uganda is a fledgling democracy, and this is just its 6th election in 49 years. And presented with the opportunity to vote once again, many Ugandans are doing so with a deep conviction.
I voted for Museveni straight away. He has given us peace.
With the message going through, corruption will have an end. We shall have more drugs in hospitals, better roads than we have.
Kizza Besigye, President Museveni's most formidable challenger, says he doesn't trust the country's election commission. He plans to do his own vote tallying and announcement. The government says he will be arrested if he carries out his threat. And if that happens, things could take a turn for the worse. Mohamed Ado, AlJazeera, Kampala, Uganda.
Now, Japan has recalled its Antarctic hunting ships earlier than planned following pressure from anti-whaling campaigners. The US-based Sea Shepherd Conservation Society used paint and stink bombs to disrupt Japanese fleets, which are allowed to kill whales under scientific research. The move means the country's harpoon vessels are heading home about a month before the end of the hunting season. It's 22:30 GMT. Here's a reminder of our top stories. Bahrain's king has asked his crown prince to start national dialogue with all parties over the continuing unrest in the country. It comes as security forces have fired on anti-government protesters in the capital, Manama. President Obama has expressed his deep concern over the situation, as well as that in Libya and Yemen. Here's one of our correspondents. He's in Bahrain. We're not naming him for security reasons.
The protesters say that they'll be staying at the hospital for the time being, although some of them have said to me that they would consider a possible another march towards the Pearl roundabout. Others, though, say that is highly unlikely given what has happened and the fact that we've had these injuries and we may well have some more deaths.
Over in Libya, at least 46 people have been killed by security forces over the past 3 days. That's according to human rights group Amnesty International. The country's revolutionary committees, which are considered the backbone of the regime, have said the response to anyone attempting to cause unrest will be sharp and violent. Friday has been scheduled by anti-government demonstrators as a day of anger against Gaddafi's leadership. Also, clashes in Yemen. There are 6 people, up to 6 people thought to be dead, dozens more wounded. Doctors said 4 people have died from gunfire in the southern port of Aden alone. Crowds have been gathering for 8 days, calling for an end to President Ali Abdullah Saleh's 32-year rule. And pro- and anti-government protesters have fought in Jordan's capital, Amman. At least 8 people there were injured. It's the first outbreak of political violence since the opposition began staging regular protests in January. The US has vetoed a United Nations resolution which would have condemned Israeli settlements as illegal. Although the US opposes new building work, it says taking the issue to the UN would only complicate efforts in Israel and the Palestinians. Well, they've said they will not resume peace talks until Israel stops settlements in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem. Well, that's it from me and the rest of the team here in London. Do stay with us, though. Counting the Cost is next. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.